afternoon. It's August 7th, 2009, and today I'm interviewing Akwi Nji-Dawson. Where were you born?
I was actually born in Iowa City, and within a year, my mom and dad and I moved to Africa. And so we moved to Cameroon, Africa. That's where my dad was born. And he and my mom actually met at Iowa State. So they were going to school there. Met at Iowa State. I was born in Iowa City. We moved to Cameroon. And my younger sister, was born there. And we lived there until I was about 8 years old.
And where do you call home now?
That is a good question, because every time somebody asks where I'm from, I have a hard time answering it in just one word. You know, usually people can say, well, I'm from Cedar Rapids or I'm from Iowa, but I have to go through the whole system because it's hard to answer that question. I call Cedar Rapids home, but when people ask where I'm from, I say that I lived in Africa until I was 8, and then I moved from there to Springville, Iowa, which is a tiny town that some people who've lived in Cedar Rapids don't even know exists, and it's just on the other side of Marion. And then from Springville we moved to Cedar Rapids. So I often go through that journey because I think that it's important to think about how each of those places shaped who I am now.
How long have you lived in Iowa?
I've lived in Iowa since I was 8, so about 20 years.
And where did you go to school growing up? What schools did you go to?
I went to Springville Elementary, and then I went to 7th grade in Springville. And 7th grade in Springville was actually the first grade in the high school building. So I was there for 7th grade, and then we moved to Cedar Rapids just before my 8th grade year, and then I went to McKinley in 8th grade. And that was, it was a struggle. I mean, going from Africa to Springville was a struggle. Because when I lived in Africa, I was seen as a commodity. My sister and I were both seen as a commodity, meaning our mom was white. We actually had 2 older brothers and an older sister whose parents were both African. And everywhere we went, people were curious about my sister and me and wanted to meet us and wanted to know who we were and where we were because we were lighter skinned and because we had an American mom. And so I grew up in Africa with that experience, which was very different than I think, most people who grow up in Africa who were either all black or all white. And I went to an international school there where students from all over the world attended school, as opposed to the public schools that were very, very bad. I remember actually wanting to go to school with my older brother who went to the public school, and my mom let me do it, and she says that she just remembers me tearing back around the corner towards the car screaming and crying, they're beating Gert, because we were a little bit late. So the school systems in Africa were very different than what we have here. The culture in Africa was very different than what we have here. And I mean, there's a lot I could say there, but we went from Africa to Springville, and that was a culture shock. Because you go from a place where I was going to school with people from all over the world to a tiny town where my sister and I are essentially desegregating the town. I think there had been one African-American family who lived there before us. And there was no handicap accessibility in the town, in the schools. There were no other students of other races or ethnicities there. And so it was it's a very conservative town, and people didn't really understand my sister and me. It didn't help that I also swam, and so they thought, well, black people can't swim, can they? And it was just, I felt like I was constantly either a living, breathing example of the stereotypes they had, or in some cases I was completely turning the stereotypes around on them and they didn't really know what to do with me. One of the memories I have of being a new resident in Springville was when the news reporters came to talk to us at the farm. And one of the things they asked us to do was balance baskets on our heads as they imagined Africans did, or as they imagined we had done while we were in Africa. And I was too young to articulate how ridiculous I thought it was, but I remember thinking, this is ridiculous. I've never balanced a basket on my head in my life. And so there are pictures of my sister and me with baskets on our heads trying to balance them as though we'd been doing it all of our lives. But it was just, again, in my mind, a reminder of the stereotypes that I think we all have, you know, of various people and regions and cultures. And we have to be reminded that those stereotypes are just stereotypes. Living in Springville was more difficult for me than it was for my sister, and I think partly because she was young enough to sort of be oblivious to the conflicts that can arise when people are closed-minded or don't fully understand, you know, people of other cultures and ethnicities. From Springville, I thought, okay, we're going to go to Cedar Rapids. We're going to move to Cedar Rapids. I'm going to get to go to McKinley, where there are going to be other black students like me. And I thought, this will be exactly what I've been wanting. And I get to McKinley, 8th grade year, and it wasn't what I had expected at all. The black kids thought I was too white. The white kids thought I was too black, and I didn't fit in anywhere. And I had about 2 or 3 friends who, you know, were genuinely my friends, but beyond that, it felt like I was sort of stuck in a zone that didn't allow me to fit in either place. And then from McKinley, I went to Wash, and that was when I really started to be comfortable with who I was and got to the point where I didn't care as much about what other people thought of me and how I either fit into their stereotypes of who they thought I should be or how I broke from those stereotypes. It was just about, you know, being who I wanted to be.